Welcome back to the Executive Edge interview series, where we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and practitioners who are shaping your work, how work actually gets done. I'm Nora Paxton, CEO, coach, leadership strategist, and advisor to founder and senior executive. I help leaders think bigger, lead more intentionally, and create lasting organizational impact. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome back Brooklyn Dicent. Brooklyn is a keynote speaker, trainer, and a coach who helps leader and team improve performance by mastering mindset, energy, and human connections. She blends neuroscience, behavioral psychology, practical coaching, and humor to help people shift how they think, communicate, and show up. And in our last conversation, if you remember, we talked about mindset, confidence, and performance in sales. But today we're going in a slightly different direction and exploring stress, burnout, and how leader can manage their energy more intentionally. Brooklyn, I am so glad to have you back.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be back. It's great to always have a chance to talk to you, Nora.
We're so excited. Well, Brooklyn, before we get into the framework itself, I'd love to start with what you are seeing in leaders today. So when leaders come to you, like feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or burnt out, what is usually happening beneath the surface?
Yeah, great question. And I love this question because a lot of leaders experience this. And I want to also preface it that when we say leaders, I'm meaning everybody is a leader in a way, right? They're leading themselves, they're leading their lives, right? You perhaps don't have a title of leader, but you're leading people in some ways, you're influencing. So I'm going to take that perspective, but just in general, leaders who lead teams and lead their organization. One of the key things that is happening, and perhaps you've seen this also in your work, it has a lot to do with identity. It has a lot to do with how people are feeling about themselves, especially in today's environment. I'm hearing a lot of the word burnout. And what does it mean? Whether that's fear, the various different blocks, and we can get into it. A lot what's going on is that people are not in alignment necessarily with how they identify themselves anymore and what they're doing, which is a bit of a disconnect. And recently, Gallup did a survey and discovered, and I was really surprised by this, but also alarmed that senior leaders, particularly women, are more impacted by this problem recently of just having a bit of an identity crisis between who they are, how they're being, and what they're doing. And that to me is very concerning. And the folks that I see in my practice are definitely demonstrating those areas to be of concern.
What do you think are some of the early warning signs that could indicate there's some burnout?
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of times too, people will start to feel a sense of, obviously physical stress and mental stress, and they start to feel like they think it's a capacity issue. Like, okay, maybe I'm overwhelmed by what's going on, but you start to notice it because you don't have a way to perhaps express what it is that you want to do differently or say differently or be differently. And it starts to, I call energy leaks. And you start to notice it, whether that's you start to get feedback from employees or feedback from peers on how you are presenting yourself, how you're being, what's happening, how you're coming across, tone, etc. And you kind of take a pause and go, what is going on? Right? What is happening for me? And so some of the immediate things I hear people say is overwhelm, just racing thoughts, not really being sure if the decisions they're making are the right decisions. They start to question themselves, where before they used to be pretty confident, pretty sure of themselves. They start to question what they're doing or how they're doing or why they're doing what they're doing. And so a lot of those, I would say, inquietude or discomfort starts to happen from a mental perspective. And then physically, of course, you get drained and you get stressed and you get tired. Those are things that happen as a result of what I call, again, energy leaks that are happening as a result of these other elements that are happening for you
Yeah.
internally.
Speaking about energy leaks, um, that brings us to the heart of our conversation today. You teach something called energy leadership. So, what is it and how do we use it?
Yeah, good question. So energy leadership, there is something that was created by a organization called IPEC, where I got my training. And I remember when I first became aware of energy leadership, it really surprised me. It took me really a few years to really grasp and understand the concept. But ultimately, it came down to that we all have a choice in how we show up. And it seems pretty obvious, like, yeah, okay, I can have a choice in how I show up. But the biggest thing is becoming aware of how I'm showing up, the kind of thinking I'm having in a situation, and ultimately my attitude. And again, it's one of those things where we don't necessarily always talk about it, but our attitude absolutely will have an impact in how we feel and how we think and how we show up. And that's what energy leadership does. So, energy leadership as a tool, we have an assessment that assesses, because everyone has what we call pretty much like think of it like a fingerprint of energy, like your attitude. Everybody has their own sort of signature energetic profile, and people show up differently in different situations. So we can have you and I can go through the same scenario, same situation, and we both may respond and react differently to the situation based on our own energy profile. And so when we discovered this, what I discovered is that we all have the capacity to go through what we call, the 7 levels of energy based on this framework. And we tend to gravitate, all of us as humans, will gravitate to something called either catabolic or anabolic energy. And catabolic energy is destructive energy, is energy that doesn't allow us to move forward, or perhaps we get angry, or we freeze, or perhaps we're not sure what to do, or we feel like we're some sort of a victim. Those are what we call energy levels 1 and 2. A lot of us do that, and that is the energetic state that we are when we are under stress. So earlier you asked me, hey, what are some things that I see? I see so many different things that leaders do, but we all will have this energetic response to situations under stress. And we have, like I said, a profile, a signature style that, for example, in my case, I tend to be a little bit on the victim side, but then I get more on the anger side. I can get frustrated. And sometimes that frustration will give you some momentum, but it doesn't fully allow me to express myself, or doesn't allow a leader to express themselves. But then when they shift over to something called anabolic state energy, this is energy that is creative, is energizes you. It literally ignites your thinking, your creativity, your connection to other people. And all I have to do is be aware. If anything else, is just be aware. How am I feeling right now? I'm noticing a situation. You get sometimes I feel I could feel a sense of even physical heat. Right? Am I feeling hot or uncomfortable? What's going on? What is my thinking behind the situation? Once I recognize what that is, being able to know that I am at choice. I can actually decide to choose a different way right now, even if the outcome is not necessarily. I'm not worried about the outcome. I'm concerned about the approach. How am I approaching a situation? Am I coming at it from a place of stress, or am I coming at it from a place of resourcefulness? And there's a way, and I'll share with you maybe towards the end, a really fast way for people to shift their choice, if you will, in the moment, so you can open yourself up to much more opportunity, much more thinking and capability and creative capability versus being under stress.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I can't wait to hear what your little trick is. But going back to, that two people can experience the same situation and respond to it differently. Tell me, Brooklyn, what do you see as the biggest energy block that people often come to you for help with?
It's a great question, and it happens over and over again. And a lot of times people come to me. It's interesting because oftentimes they'll come to me for burnout issues. I speak on this often too. I'm often asked to come speak on burnout and how to help people deal with burnout. And oftentimes is either burnout or fear. They just don't know that's what it is. It's they're afraid of something, afraid of taking action, afraid of moving forward in a particular thing, and it's holding them back. And it may, again, energy leak may seem like something else. So one of the things I get is often is burnout. Another thing I get often too, I would say, like I said, it's fear. People come to me, go, I'm afraid of making a decision, or what's next, or because you haven't necessarily, again, assign or engage with the identity of who that person needs to be, right? Particularly a leader who becomes a leader for the first time, or they're transitioning in their career. They're going from one particular level of performance to the next level of performance, and they haven't been there yet. And so for them, is like you start hearing things like, "Oh, I feel like I'm an imposter. I feel like I'm not good at this. I feel like I'm not even good at speaking in front of a board. I don't even know how they're listening to me." All these things are energy leaks, and it has to do with identity.
Yeah.
The next
And
thing that said people, yeah.
oh, God, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say next thing people talk to me is really fear, and then the third is burnout. So those three elements. So I don't know if to say there's one particular one that's higher than another. Burnout is like the lead, and then it's fear, and ultimately is identity.
Yeah, and I think it is an important distinction because someone can look successful on the outside while the way they are operating is becoming less sustainable. So, how do you help leader recognize when their stress has shifted from productive pressure into something more harmful?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, oftentimes what we will do is we break down what's happening, right? And so have them walk me through examples of what's going on for them, how they're showing up. And really what I'm after, and again, it's something that everybody can do. And I often ask them, and I would ask the people listening to this is start actually documenting. And I don't mean documenting like writing a whole paragraph about something, but really documenting the thoughts you're having during a particular situation. What is the thoughts that you're having? And you don't have to super analyze it. Oftentimes the thoughts are pretty simple. You know what? Why am I bothering? This is more difficult than I expected. What's the point of all this, right? And you start to notice these thoughts that are happening. And then what you start to notice is once you see a particular thought or you notice a particular thought, they start to notice is the frequency they're having those same thoughts. The frequency by which they're having the same thoughts, what's happening is it becomes like a mantra. Like, what's the point of me doing this? You know what? Nobody really cares. This is not going to go anywhere anyway, right? So these thoughts become a consistent thought. And what those thoughts are doing essentially is creating an energy or an emotion behind the situation, which is then catapults that person into stress. Because, for example, if they're having those thoughts, their identity is saying, why am I bothering? This is not who I am. I can't express myself fully, whatever the case may be. And you start to feel the sense of stress. And all the stress is that you are out of alignment with where you want to be. So I often say, become aware. And I keep saying it over and over again. When you become aware of what it is you're thinking and feeling, if you watch my TEDx too, I talk about this. The feeling is the secret. Pay attention to how you're feeling. Jot down the thoughts that are causing that emotion for you to then have. It's almost like the thoughts become the software, right? The software of your mind to help you to recode and reprogram what it is you really want to do. So you don't have to change the situation at all. The situation can still be, challenging and terrible, whatever the case may be. It's not the situation, it's how I'm approaching it. And one of the key factors is let me drill down and figure out what are the thoughts that I'm having during this particular situation to determine what can I do differently.
Yeah. And by the way, I loved your TEDx. So if you have not watched it, I encourage you guys to watch it. So let's make it this practical, shall we?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
Brooklyn, I'm having a bad day. I'm really
Yeah.
having a bad day. How can the principle of energy leadership help me?
Right. So, I would say, and you can take, Nora, you can take this as a real scenario or as a fictitious scenario or something that you've seen a client do,
Yeah.
and say, okay, so what constitutes a bad day? Because a bad day could be, a day has a lot of hours. So what specifically would constitute a bad day, for example? What needs to happen for it to be a bad day?
It doesn't go the way I predicted it to go. It's going just issue after issue after issue. I don't have it's just not going the way in the right direction that I anticipated for my
That
day.
you anticipated, right? Okay. So you had an expectation of how something would go and it's not going that way, all of a sudden. And
Yeah.
then my question would be is so how are you so how are you as a result is how are you feeling about this? What's going on for you internally? Yeah, let's start with how are you feeling about this?
As I can feel like, well, can it get worse than that? I mean, I feel depleted. I feel I don't have time to just rethink, reposition myself. And all I keep seeing is problems.
Problems. Yeah. Okay. So in a real scenario, what essentially what I'm looking to do is to zero in on what is at the core, which is why we call it core. At the core, what is the thinking and feeling that is happening as the situation is going on? Because again, it's not about the situation; it's about how you're responding to it. So I'd want to know exactly what's happening. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a client recently that is running her own business, and she's an entrepreneur and started her business a couple of years ago. And she came to me because she was struggling with figuring out whether she keeps this business or not because she's struggling. She can't figure out how to make it work. She says she's tried everything, right? And so that's usually when people say the words everything or always or whatever. I pay attention because that means they really haven't tried everything, right? It's just a belief that they have tried everything. So we got to the conversation. I said, okay, so what's going on when you go to, for example, one of the things that she does is that she works in the, I would say, produce or juicing business. And I said, so what happens when you go to market, so to speak? What's your feeling? What happens? Oh, you know what? People just don't care about health. They're not really interested. This is really important, and they don't care. I said, interesting. So they don't care. It's not important. How do you know? And then she had to pause and think. She goes, because they tell me. I said, okay, do all your clients say that? So again, it's distilling down to what is the main thought. And the main thought she was having is, this is not important to people. I have a product nobody cares about. And ultimately, I don't even know if I want to do this. Right. So those are the thoughts that were happening underneath as she was responding externally. So part of this process of energy leadership is recognizing that the thoughts that you're having are driving what we call performance or mastery. It's driving your performance. Okay. So my job is to figure out. So I always tell people, if you don't like the results you're getting, if you're feeling uncomfortable, it's not what you want, it's not, you're not getting the results you want, sort of scroll back. Notice the thoughts you're having about the situation. Let's not put a judgment into whether the situation is good or bad, or, people don't care. None of that. How am I showing up to the situation? Right. And really distilling what are the common thoughts that I'm having here? And then it seems so simple, but this is super important, is to transform those thoughts, not from negative to a positive or any of that, but transform the words that then become more invigorating. So in this case with my client, I said to her, I said, okay, so what would be some words that when you show up to market with your juices and so on, what do you need to say to yourself? Man, I can't wait to get out there. And then she started using words. I can't wait to get out there. People actually, not everybody may be interested in health juicing and so on, but those that are love this. And what happens is, as she started to do this, and this is incredible, what she started to notice was she got more people giving her positive feedback at the end of her day than she was getting negative feedback or people not interested in her product. So now, was that the case? Were there more people telling her or not? No, it's become started to become aware because she had the filter of energy that was more, like I said, anabolic or more creative and forward moving versus energy that was holding her back. So at the end of the day, what I would say is pay attention to the core thoughts you have. Now, some people may say, well, how will I know? And I say that write them down. Write down the thoughts you're having, because here's the thing about the brain, super sneaky. It will find a way to keep you safe. Even though it's the brain's job is not designed to make you successful or make you fail, it's designed to keep you safe. And so if it sees a situation as a threat, it'll say, well, Nora, why are you bothering it? Why are you doing this? There's no point of that. That happens as a result of the brain trying to keep you safe. So my job is to figure, hey, what's the programming? And the programming is the thoughts. So I always say, change your thoughts, you change the results. But you got to find out what those thoughts are. And then those thoughts will generate either forward moving energy or blocking energy.
Yeah. So thank you, Brooklyn. So just to summarize, right? The first thing that someone should do is to catch the thought and write it down, right? And then reframing the thought in a more positive way, correct?
Correct. I,
Okay.
I would say a more positive way, in the way that they want, right? So what is the
No,
result you want? Yeah.
exactly. The result that they want. No. How quickly can someone realistically shift their energy, Brooklyn?
I got to tell you, and this is the best part of it all, in seconds. In seconds. In seconds. You can shift your energy in seconds. What happens is you have to train the brain to notice the drain. I would say train the brain to notice the drain. Train the brain to notice when and by the way, the brain is designed literally to do whatever you tell it to. Okay. Our subconscious mind is designed to tell it to do whatever we tell it to. So if I tell myself, hey, I want to get a better result with my team, with a conversation I need to have. I have to have a difficult conversation. I want a different energy that helps the situation be better. You start to train your brain to notice it. What can I do differently, and so on and so forth. And your brain will go to task. But what we have to do is become aware. Too often we walk around being, I would say, driven by our emotions. And in fact, we drive our emotions by our thoughts. So if you pay attention to how you're showing up and the thoughts you're having, and train your brain to notice it. And in the beginning, it does take a little bit of time to notice it, but I promise you, the moment you notice it and become aware, you then recognize the fact that you have choice. You have choice. Great examples of this are when you're driving, right? Somebody cuts you off. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm like, you know what? Take a breath, notice a thought, and realize, you know what? I'm not in a rush. Let them go to where they have to go. It instantly changes my dynamic, right? So again, it could be in an instant. Doesn't take very long.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking you through this great example. So, that leads me to talk about what leaders often think. They often think they are hiding their stress really well, but usually their team feels it, and I can see it in my practice. So, how does a leader energy affect trust, culture, and performance?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Well, it affects everything because energy is contagious, and so is fear. Energy is contagious, and so is fear. And the fact of the matter is that leaders hold, the power of someone's livelihood, right? Which is why so often people at work, they perhaps want to say things and do things, and they hold back because they're like, you know what, this person has the ability to have me be here or not be here. And so there's that level, there's that unlevel playing field, if you will, as a result. So the bottom line is that every leader needs to know this, and there's this thing called positive relational energy. Positive relational energy is understanding that you as a leader will impact the energy of your team even without speaking, just being, because of how the team's engagement with you has been in the past and so on and so forth, how they've seen you, perceived you, and so on. Your energy will impact that team in one or two ways. And here's the if I could tell this to every leader, it would save us so much heartache in a lot of organizations. Is that when a team, and you'll notice it because it's obvious by the results the team is getting. A lot of high performing teams may have a leader who they want to not only perform for and do their best, but gets encouraged by their leader, is a leader who shows up, generally with them, has conversations, understand who they are. They have this empathetic energy towards their team. The team will then do things individually as people, will tap into what is known as discretionary energy. Discretionary energy is energy that the manager never asked for. It's not part of your job description. It is simply the desire of someone to perform at their best as a result of working for a leader who's more positive versus a leader who is not. So the impact is huge. The impact there is actually tons of studies being done, and has been done, and are being done, especially by Harvard Business Review, on the impact of a leader who shows up with something called positive relational energy. They will impact not only that team, but literally 2 to 3 to 5 times outside of that team, just by the way they show up energetically on a team. So it has a huge, huge impact.
Okay, so can you tell me how does it look like during a difficult period?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So do it for, say for example, and this happens often. Say for example, the team is suffered, and I deal with a lot of sales teams often. So let's say the team has suffered a challenge, a setback. This is a great example to do this because it's easy when you're doing well, but what about a setback? The team has experienced a setback in some way, and the manager, the leader, decides to have a conversation one-on-one with people, but then also as a team. And what she does or what he does is actually express to the team their genuine feelings, whether that's, hey, you know what, this is difficult. I know there's a better way, but somehow collectively we got to figure out how to do that. Or the fear of, wow, this is really a scary situation to kind of go through. Let me tell you how we're going to right this ship, and actually share their own thoughts, their own opinions in a vulnerable way, and not have to sort of safeguard themselves against the team thinking, oh, I have to be a leader, I have to be this all powerful person, but rather be human in difficult situations. What the team does then says, oh, you know what, we can help. Let's figure out a way to do this together because I want to help my leader succeed as well. So especially during difficult situations, the leader has to tap into high levels of energy versus the levels, the catabolic energy, which is 1 and 2. Oftentimes in a difficult situation, a leader will revert back to stress. And when they revert back to stress, they tend to hold people at a distance or pull up their walls. If the leader transitions from that to say, "Hey, you know what? It was a hard quarter. We have to figure out how to right the ship, and I want your help." And they work with each team member individually as a group. The team begins to have a sense of, as we have probably heard the term, psychological safety. And psychological safety, the way that the leader is able to do that is to have 4 elements. Number one is people have the ability to feel like they belong in the team. 2, they have the sense that they can learn, which means I can make mistakes. When I can learn my mistakes, you also help me to contribute by giving me. I say, "Hey, Nora, we had a tough quarter. What are your ideas? I know that you've come up with some really great. What are your thoughts about this? Tell me. Even though, and Nora, tell me the ideas that you perhaps thought I would throw out. What are they?" And then you might say, "Oh, well, maybe I could do X, Y, Z." You go, "You know what? I don't know if that'll work, but let's try it." That gives you, right, as an employee, a sense of ownership and feel goodness, if you will. This is okay. Let me go figure it out, and you do everything possible to see how to make this work. That is what a leader can do when they show up to with a team with positive relational energy, especially during difficult times. What the team is looking for is to see your vulnerability, to see how you are human, and to welcome them into solving the problem at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always easy for them. So that leads me to let's get back a little bit to about talking about burnout.
Yeah.
As you know, a lot of burnout advice begins after someone is already depleted. So what can leader do proactively to manage their energy before they reach that point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say there's a lot of different things we can do, and I don't usually say, "Oh, breathe and meditate" or whatever else. It's not really what it is. It has a lot to do with you recognizing, first of all, what are the signs? What are the signs for you? Each person has a different way of expressing that, right? Again, remember, burnout is not about capacity. Burnout is about identity, right? So burnout isn't just that, hey, I'm working too much, right? What happens is you're spending a lot of time trying to survive something, which is where burnout comes from. So my question then would be, how are you responding? How are you reacting? What's happening for you? And you become more aware. And I'll give you an example. Even in my own business, there was a moment when I was just feeling this sense of overwhelm, and like the walls were sort of coming into me because I'm trying to figure out how we're going to make this work. How do I do this differently? How do I take this business to the next level as a leader? And I was starting to think, and then here's an example. Sometimes we have to do things and we put them off. So for me, it's procrastination. I don't want to have that conversation. I don't want to send that email. So I had to start paying attention. What was the leak? How was burnout leaking into my behavior? Avoidance. For somebody else might be something different. So you want to notice, what do I do? Remember, burnout is not about capacity. Burnout is about feeling you have to survive something, your survival energy. So what am I do? What do I do? And so when you become aware of what that is, and it might be simple, it could be a lot of different things, but if you start to become aware of what are the things that I'm doing, maybe ask for feedback, notice your behavior, then what I say is try to impact one small behavior at a time. Not everything at once, but what's one small thing. In my case, it was, oh, you know what? That's right. I'm a salesperson. So I wasn't making the sales call. Ah, Tomorrow I'm going to try to call, not try, but I'm going to call 5 people that has been on my list to call. And then the day came and I sat down as a leader and I'm like, oh, I'm going to make these 5 calls. And when I made them, all of a sudden burnout disappeared. Why is that? Because I was addressing the way that the burnout energy was leaking, which is avoidance. So then I took action, and taking action for me meant, oh, I need to make some phone calls. For somebody else, it might be different. Maybe I may have to have a difficult conversation. I've been putting it off, right? Procrastination is often one of the ways that burnout starts to show up, right? It's not showing up. It's maybe putting something off to another day. Down talking something that is actually more important than it needs to be, or saying, oh, it's not really important, but it actually is. How does your burnout behavior show up? What are the things you're doing? I'd say pay attention to that, because burnout isn't about capacity. I could be working, sun up to sundown and be ecstatic and happy. It's not capacity, it's survival. So how is it showing up for you? Identify what that is quickly, and then how you're reacting. uh for some people it's people pleasing. For some people it's I have to prove myself is another one, especially when you're new in a role, new as a leader. I gotta prove myself. I gotta prove that I'm great at this. That's costing you an identity shift between where you are and where you want to be. And that I would say that stress, or that we'll cut all this out later, but basically the place between where you are and where you want to be, that tension creates what we call burnout. But it's not capacity, it's identity, and you're surviving where you are today. And so you can shift that by figuring out what I got to do differently.
What is the thought or the belief that is driving it, and then what is the how we're behaving, or what is the reaction that we have, and basically introducing small incremental actions.
Absolutely. The
That's it.
smaller the better, by the way. The smaller the better.
Okay. So now we look at the organization. Those people works in organization. What do you think those organizations should be doing to support healthier energy?
It's a good question. I think one of the big things that as an organization, as a culture, right? When companies are thinking about, hey, how can we reduce burnout? How can we reduce workplace stress, or improve wellness? Right? Is first of all realizing that it's an issue. Okay. Literally in 2019, the World Health Organization included this topic of burnout, for example, in their classification, as part of it being not a disease, but a workplace phenomena. A workplace phenomena. So, and it has not gone away, by the way. In their rewriting of all the various different diseases, they included burnout as being an issue. So overall, as a culture, one of the key things the company can do is be aware. But be aware is, providing training, providing outlets, giving people insights and what else they can do, and also providing the environment by which people can learn. I think oftentimes we forget about how powerful it is, especially in today's environment, and the kind of workers we have today in the workplace. People love to learn. People love to share. People love to be part of something and to contribute. And when those things are happening, going back to, again, psychological safety, and I think a lot of folks that probably hear this have heard the term, but psychological safety has four specific tenets to it. And a lot of it at the core is, as an organization, how do we help people feel like they belong working here? What are the things that we do? How do we demonstrate that? How do we show people that we value them? How do we do that? And it's not just by, things that people write on the wall, but in practice. Again, the second thing is, are we giving people opportunity to learn and to make mistakes? And also beyond making mistakes is, how do we then help people take those things they learn and make mistakes in, and also share and grow from that, right? And the fourth thing is super important, and it happens often in organizations that are having a challenge with culture, is, are they able to speak against the status quo? Can people raise their hand and safely say, "Hey, Mr. Boss," or "Hey, Miss Boss Manager, I'm concerned about X, and here's how we should do it. All right, here's what I'm thinking." And then the leader. Here's the interesting thing: the leader being able to provide what's known as cloud cover for that person who wants to speak up. Right? You'll notice it too. And we can talk about this for hours on this, but if you notice it too, when people start a company, the first 30 to 60 days, the main question they're asking themselves is, do I belong here? Is this the place for me? Okay. And when I share this with leaders, they go, "Oh my gosh, I look at all these people who've started. Yeah, I don't know." That's the main question, silently. And what they're doing is they're observing the environment, they're observing the culture to see, do I belong here? And by belonging here doesn't mean just that, and oftentimes people think it's culture, like, oh, diversity. No, it's, as a human, do I feel like the people here feel like they belong, like they feel valued? What happens when Jenny raises her hand in opposition to an idea? What happens when somebody brings up something to the manager? What do they do? How do they respond? That's all that new hire is doing, is observing the behavior. And for them is, if they go, "Oh yeah, I noticed at the moment that Jenny raises her hand, the manager says, yeah, absolutely, let's put that into practice." I worked for several companies specifically where this was the case. It made me feel incredibly safe to then bring my thoughts, my ideas, my genius to the role versus holding back. And at the core, psychological safety and psychological safety energy is something that will impact the results that a company gets time and time again.
Yeah. And as you know, I work with executive and I see it often in corporations where, if the culture, they lead the culture, right? If it start to break down at that level, you see it cascading and things start to normalize where they should not be. The habits that are portrayed at the top are becoming a normal things in across the company, and so it's very important to actually highlight that. So thank you for bringing that to us. um,
Yeah.
so let's talk about a practical takeaway for the leader these are listening today who is already feeling stretched thin, and what is one thing that you would recommend for them to, just a small shift that they could make today, maybe what could become possible if they were to practice that shift consistently.
Yeah, well, it's a few questions in there. I mean, there's something they can do, and what could be possible. Sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. At the end of the day, people who have leadership roles in organizations, you're human, right? You have the capacity, just like everybody else, to deal with stress or not, and so on. And you have limited ability, oftentimes, to do everything you want to do. So here's what I would say. When I say limited ability, means you can't do all the things at one time, right? I'd say number one, pay attention to the small bits of behavior that you are demonstrating and how people respond to it. Notice, and again, the reason why I say it's small behavior is really important because it's in the micro behaviors that culture is actually created. It's in the micro behaviors. Give you an example. If you notice that, or you've heard people say, oh, so and so, you email them and you don't hear back, they ghost you, like you don't hear back for days from them, and they're your manager. Notice it. Pay attention. Maybe start responding quickly. You see what I'm saying? It's a small micro behaviors that has impacted the way that people see you, perceive you, and how they work for you, right? As an employee to a leader. So one of the small things I would say is small steps. And Carol Dweck talks about this. We talk about growth mindset all day. And if you read the book Growth Mindset and Carol Dweck's work, it's unbelievable. But one of the things she talks about is taking small steps. Small steps help you to make incremental changes in your behavior. And what happens is when you take a small step and you start to see wins in that small step, whatever the case may be, whatever feedback you got, your energy starts to shift and you go, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. It's kind of cool when you start winning, right? And then eventually you start to add to that. And once you master one thing, you move on. But I think that the key thing is that sometimes we think of all that's going on for us too globally, and you got to start with small steps. That's the number one. Number two, as I would say, is that if you're, again, a leader who has a team, open yourself up to giving people opportunity to talk about what's going on for them, what's going on for them in their workplace. What do they want to see differently? And it's not just as general. Oh, tell us how you think, but no, have a conversation, have a dialogue with your people one on one. Super important. But remember, they've been observing you in micro behaviors forever, so it's going to take a while to earn some of that trust back, if you will, if you've lost it. But the key is that micro behaviors, having conversations. Then lastly, and I think this is the key for you personally as a leader and for your own personal development, is paying attention to the thoughts that you're having when you're having particular emotions that are causing you stress. When you're under stress, what are the thoughts that you're having that is causing you stress? No, sorry, that's not that. What are the thoughts that you're having during stressful situations? Because those thoughts are creating more of it. Basically, is what I'm saying, right? So if you pay attention to that and then change those micro thoughts and start practicing that on a daily basis, I think it'll be super helpful to begin to shift your energy to a place that you can be undeniable.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, Brooklyn. um so Brooklyn,
Yes.
for our listener who recognize themselves or their teams in this conversation, who benefits most from your energy leadership work and the type of challenges that you help them solve.
Mhm.
So, where can listener learn more about your work and bring you basically into their organization?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So there's a few ways people can work with me. Of course, they can work with me one-on-one. I love to work in groups as well. If they visit my website, brooklyndescent.com, there they can set time to talk to me. I can do everything from half day to full day workshops with teams. I got to tell you, the teams that start doing energy leadership work as a team is it's almost night and day what happens and what leaders are telling me about the how people are shifting their behavior, because it comes from the inside out. They haven't been forced to. It comes from a place that you want to do the change or want to change versus being told to, and the realization is incredible. So what I would say is, if anything has resonated and you go, yeah, man, I got to work on some of this stuff for myself, but as well as my team, then I would welcome a conversation where we can do half day workshop or a full day workshop with your team, pretty much any size. With larger teams, we break them down into smaller groups so we can manage it. And then you as a leader, by the way, you can get a sense through our assessment, get a sense of how your entire team is showing up. And this was a big eye opener for a lot of leaders when they saw their entire team deal with a particular situation. They didn't realize that it had to do everything with, like you said earlier, how that leader was showing up was impacting downstream to their direct reports who are directors and so on. So yeah, that's what I would say is engage with me either through my site, obviously through this podcast, or find me on LinkedIn on the Brooklyn Dicent, and I would be happy to talk about what's going on for you and your team.
Well, Brooklyn, thank you. Thank you for coming back and having this conversation with me. Um, and this, I would say, this such a timely conversation with me, because what I appreciate about energy leadership is that it gives people a practical way we to take ownership of how they respond, even when they cannot control what is happening around them. Stress may be unavoidable, but staying stuck in it does not have to be. And you've reminding us that the energy we bring into a conversation, a decision of or a room affects not only our own performance, but also the people we lead. So thank you for sharing your insight, your practical tools, and your energy with us today. And to everyone listening, we'll include information on how to learn more about Brooklyn and her work. Until next time, keep leading with intention and stay on your edge.